Hi guys, this is Andrew Burgess with NetTuts, and in this, the 11th lesson of our Ruby for Newbies screencast series, we're going to be talking about Tilt, which is a really cool Ruby gem that I've been having a lot of fun with recently, and I want to show you what it can do. So let's get right into it. So of course, we'll start by installing Tilt. Now, first of all, you're probably wondering, what does Tilt do? Tilt is a templating engine wrapper. The developer on the GitHub page calls it a thin interface over a bunch of different Ruby templating engines. So if you have heard of Haml or ERB, if you've used if you've used Rails or Sinatra, any of the popular Ruby web frameworks, you've probably used ERB or Haml or another similar templating engine to write the views for your web app or your website. And then you can pass values into the template, render it, and you have static HTML. And I've been having some fun with this recently, and I'm going to show you how it works. So let's make a new directory here on the desktop. We'll just call it fun with Tilt, if I can spell tonight. All right. To start with, I'm just going to create an rvmrc file. So we have rvm rvmrc create. We're going to be using Ruby 192, 1.9.2. And we'll just create a gem set called Fun with Tilt. Just name it after our project. Alright, now I'm just going to cd back into Fun with Tilt. Yes, we will accept that. Alright, so now we have our little environment set up. Let's install the gem. So I use Bundler. And although what I'm doing here may seem a little complex for what we're doing, just installing one gem, it's a good idea just to get used to doing this kind of thing, because when you have a bigger project, these kind of things, like setting up rvmrc file and using a bundler to install your gems, will really save you a lot of time. So let's save that, and now here in the terminal, we'll just run bundle install to install the gem. If you're not using Bundler, you can just install the gem with gem install tilt. Or if you're not using RVM, do sudo gem install tilt. Alright, so we have tilt installed now. So now let's use it. Alright, well first let's create a template. So I'm going to open Vim here, and inside Vim, let's start by opening, we're just going to call it tutsplus.erb. So this is an ERB file. So we'll start with a little HTML5 template here. Now, so notice what I'm doing here. And oops, I forgot my equals sign there. So if you're not familiar with what we're writing here is ERB, it's very similar to PHP, in that, in PHP you can just write plain HTML, and then whenever you want to insert a value via PHP, you just didn't use your PHP tags and put in the value inside those tags, and whatever is evaluated in there will be put into your HTML. We're doing the very same thing here in Ruby, except this is called ERB, which stands for Embedded Ruby. Okay, so we have a title for our site there. Then down here, let's just say a few of the Tuts Plus sites. And then down here, let's just create an unordered list, just like this. And then in this unordered list, we're going to have a list of sites, and we're going to say sites.each do name and link. We're going to actually have a Ruby hash. So we're going to take the name of the site as being the value, as being the key, and the link as being the value. And then in here, we can just have our standard link element with an href inside it. So we'll put the link in there, and that quote, and then here we'll put the name. And there we have it. So there's our very simple template. We just have a couple values that we're filling in. If I just clean this up a bit. Okay. And so now this is a template that we can use to that we need to render into all HTML based on whatever values we pass into the template. So if you're using Sinatra or Ruby, Sinatra or Rails, it's really easy to just call whatever function your library or your web framework has, and it'll do that all for you. But if you're doing it manually, sometimes it's not as intuitive. If you just wanted to install ERB to generate HTML outside of your normal Rails or Sinatra project, how would you do this? And Tilt is exactly what we're going to use to do that today. So let's go ahead and write another script here. I'm going to open, and we'll just call it using tilt.rb. Okay, so of course we'll start by requiring tilt. Now we need to create the data that we're going to pass in. So let's have our site's hash here. It's just going to be a hash like that. And in here, let's put some values. So we're going to have nettuts and http://net.tutsplus.com. Okay, so there we have some site data. And now what we need is a context object. And we'll talk about exactly what this does in a minute. We're just going to have a blank new Ruby object. And then we're going to find the context property title. Now remember, properties are really methods in Ruby. And we're just going to return tuts plus sites. Just something like that for now. So remember, this is, although it is a method that we're defining here, it's just a property. This is the way to define a property on just a blank method like we have there. Okay, I'm sorry, a blank object. And so now we need the template. So we're going to store this in a template object. We'll say template, and we say tilt : and : just means a class inside of the tilt class. So we're going to say ERB template, and that is template is the class that we want to create an instance of. We'll say new, and we'll just pass in our tutsplus.erb as the template. And so now template here, this value right there is our template. And so now we want to write this template, we want to render the template with the data that we've described above, and we want to store it in a file. So let's say file.open, let's say sites.html. We're going to pass a W because we want to open this for writing. Can't forget that quote there. All right, and we'll do this with a block. And in here we're going to say file.write. Now what do we want to write to the file? If you're not familiar with what I've just done here, file.open, we've opened the sites.html file. W means we want to write to it. W also means that if the file already exists, it'll wipe it clean. And whatever we write now will be the only content in the file. If you want to append, you want to use A instead of W for the mode. And then we pass that file object to a block, and inside we're going to write here, so I could just write hello world or whatever I want to write, and that will be saved in the sites.html file. In this case, we want to do, template.render. And we want to pass two values here. Render takes two parameters. The first one is a context object. So as you guess, in this case, it's going to be our context object. And any properties on the context object will become variables that we can access from the template. So in this case, our context object has one property, title, which will be accessible via title here, as you probably guessed. So tuts plus sites will be the value that's should show up as our title here. If there are other things you want to pass in that aren't in the object, that, for example, this might not be an object that we make. This might be a post object that we get out of a database or something like that. If there are extra values that you want to pass in, what we can do is pass them in a hash here at the end as our second parameter. So if we wanted to have a sites value, we can pass in our sites variable like that, and we should keep it consistent up here by naming that sites. And of course, I've written this the most verbose way, so let me simplify it. If a hash is the last parameter, we don't have to put on the curly braces. Also, if your key is just a symbol, we can put the colon at the end and leave off the hash rocket, and there's the simplest way of writing that. All right, so now if we run this, we should get a sites.html file with this template rendered with that data. So let's give it a try. We'll flip back here to the terminal. We'll say Ruby using tilt.erb. Let me clean off the terminal here, and then we'll hit enter. Now we didn't get any output, which probably means, yes, there's our sites.html file. So let's come back here to Vim and open sites.html on a tab. And this is the result. You can see right here in the title folder, title line, we have tuts plus sites, just as you expect. And then down here we have 4 list items with, now notice this, obviously we forgot an equals sign with the href. Let me fix that now. So if we go back here, if we put equals there, come back here, oops, rerun it. Yes, reload the file. There we have our equals signs. So you can see what we did here. If you're not familiar with how this works, hashes like this have an each method, and passing to a block, each will pass the key and the value. I've called them name and link here for more intelligent names on these variables, but they're basically just the key. In this case, that's the name of the site, and the value, which is the link of the site. So that's how we get our simple template like this. Now we can do something a little more complex here with tilt. For example, let's when we use this render method here, render can actually pass to a block. Remember, blocks can either be with do end or curly braces. In this case, I think curly braces just seems more correct. That's what they use in the documentation, so that's what I'm going with here, although I'm pretty sure do and end would work as well. So what will happen here is if we have a yield keyword. So let me just delete these lines here. And if we have, let me do this. Yield is a keyword that you may recall is related to blocks. Whenever you yield to a method, or whenever, you have yield in a method, yield will automatically yield the execution to the block that was passed to that method. In this case, when our template has the word yield in it, whatever is in here, we're going to yield to whatever we put in, whatever Ruby code goes in the block that was passed to the render method. And anything passed in here will be put inside, inserted here where this yield value is. So let me just create an extra file here. I'm going to just paste that there for now. Let's come back here to this. So if we just decided to say, hello world, we are testing out tilt. Just like that. Let me just ignore that for now. If we were to do that, come back here and rerun this, then if we come back here, reload this file, notice how we have this, what we had before, but in the body where we were saying yield, we have hello world, we're testing out tilt. So whatever we pass in here will get rendered there. Now you might say, well, why not just pass that as a variable here or just add it to the hash? Well, it's because, of course, in here we can actually execute Ruby code. And so we don't have to just pass in a string like this. And what I've been using this for in the project I've been working on right now, or the project that I've been using tilt on, which you'll probably see in a tutorial before too long on it here, is I'm rendering a second template inside it. So what I have is, let's go like this. So what we have right here is our second template, and I'm going to save this as sites.erb, and then I'm going to, let me close that, and then I'm going to rename our tutsplus.erb to index, or actually not index, to layout.erb. And then let's open layout.erb here. Right, so layout.erb just yields, and in this case we're going to yield to sites.erb, which will render our sites. Now let's close sites.html here. Now in here what we'll do is create a new tilt object here. Let me show you something neat here now. Previously we've had to say tilt : which just means subclass, erb template.new. Now let's say you don't necessarily know the name of the template that you want to pass in, and that's kind of determined while the program's running. Furthermore, let's say you don't even know if it's going to be in ERB or if it's going to be in HAML, or maybe it's just going to be in Markdown. The neat thing here is that we can just do tilt.new, so create a new tilt object, and whatever we pass in here, so for example, let me show you here. If we go to let me just create a new file here that we're just going to call something.haml, just so we have a haml file there. So now let's hop into IRB. We're going to require tilt. And now if I say t equals tilt.new, well, first let's say tilt : ERB template dot new layout.erb. If we say t.class, just ignore all that output there, but you can even see it up here, it's a tilt ERB class. If we say t.class, we can see this object is of class tilt : ERB template. If we just say tilt.new and we pass in our sites.erb, now we didn't tell it that it's an ERB file, but it saw that the file extension was ERB, and it said, well, we must want to use an ERB file, and so therefore we didn't have to tell it what it was. It knew what to assume, and you can see if we do t equals tilt.new, what do we call it? Something.haml, no such file to load. I wonder if I have to have the haml gem install. Oops, let's try that. If we do a gem install haml, no, let's hop back into IRB, require tilt, require haml, tilt.new, something.haml. There you go. And now if we put that in a variable here, you can see that t.class equals tilt.haml, even though we didn't specify, we just said tilt new haml. So we had to require haml there, but once we have the haml library, tilt can use it. Okay. So you see how that... Oh, let me mention one more thing just before we go back. So let's say, let me just exit this. What do we have? Actually, we'll do it right in our code. So let's come back over here. But first, let me close sites.erb here, and let's rename sites.erb. We're going to call it sites.embeddedruby, if we just wanted to call it that for some weird reason, or if we had another proprietary file name or something, or file extension, something like that, where it wasn't going to be the file name that Tilt would expect, but Tilt did support it. What we can do, and we'll do it right in here. Excuse me. Let's just do it up at the top here. So we can say tilt.register, and we are going to say we want to use the tilt ERB template engine when we have, and what do we call it? Embedded Ruby as the file extension. So what we've just done is registered this file extension and said we want to use this template engine when you see that file extension. So now in here we can say just tilt.new. I'm actually going to put parentheses around this because we're going to execute it right away. So we're going to say tilt.new sites.embeddedruby. We're going to render it right away. We're going to just pass object.new, a blank object, because we don't have any specific properties we want for this. And then we'll pass the sites to that, and we can actually remove them from up here because they're not going to be needed when writing in the layout. We only need the title, but when writing sites.embeddedruby, we're going to need these. All right, so let's see if sites.html is what we expect it to be when we run sites.using ERB. All right, so we have an error here. Let's see. No such, oh right, tuts+.erb. We renamed this to layout.erb. That's fine. Okay. And it ran without a problem. So in here, let's open sites.html. And you can see we get exactly what we would expect to get. We have our tuts+ sites here and our unordered list showing up just fine in here. So there you have it. That is a look at the Tilt rendering engine, or really just wrapper for the other rendering engines. And that's what's really nice about this. It makes using whatever rendering engine you want, whatever template engine you'd like to use, as easy as what I've shown you here. The neat thing is, it's not just for HTML template languages. If you use Sass, or SCSS. Jeffrey's had some tutorials on those recently on NetTuts. Or if you use CoffeeScript, I'm pretty sure there's been a tutorial on that too in NetTuts. Tilt has Tilt can use all of those, and you can use those to generate CSS and JavaScript as well. So I've been using Tilt recently to create a baked blogging system, which I hope to tell you more about in a tutorial on how to do this yourself soon on NetTuts. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. This has been Ruby for Newbies, NetTuts Ruby Screencast Series, Lesson 11. Till next time, I'm Andrew Burgess.